I want to show you this first video. Let me just show you this first video. What this is going to show you guys is that when we give one organization autonomy without any third party able to regulate them in any real world way, then you're going to get things like this. This is absolutely horrific. Just for a minute, I don't want to ruin the video for you, but just imagine that this is your cousin. Okay, that's all I want you to do, and I'll try to shut up because sometimes I get excited and I get angry and I'll start to talk too much because I get mad. And so, without further ado, let's just watch this together, and I'll.
Officer facing 5 years prison time.
Almost 15 times for no reason, and later paid the price for it. On September 4th, 2022, two officers from the Michigan State Police were out on patrol duty when they noticed that a male subject was walking on the roadway instead of the sidewalk. Rather than giving him a verbal warning and asking him to stay on.
So did you hear that though? He was walking down the roadway instead of walking on the sidewalk. That's why he stopped.
Sidewalk. Both officers pulled up behind the male subject, got out of their patrol vehicle, and immediately made physical contact with them.
Okay, so let me break this down just a little bit. What's happened right here? So this they have the right to grab him for officer safety. That's part of what a Terry stop is. However, because he was walking in the road and there's a city ordinance or statute that makes it illegal to walk in the road, then the police had probable cause to engage with him to give him a ticket for him walking in the road. Terry versus Ohio, though, allows the cops to grab him in the name of officer safety because they don't know if he has a knife or a gun or a stick and he's going to attack them. So what they do here when they get out of the car and they immediately go hands-on, technically it's legal. And let's see what happens if there's going to be any prison time or anything like that. But I'm just telling you the legalities of what you're seeing.
As expected, the male subject, 28-year-old Michael D. Wilson, was startled and confused when both officers started to employ physical force without any warnings and grabbed him by his arms to pull him towards the patrol vehicle. At that point, Mr. Wilson made it clear to the officers that he had done nothing wrong.
I ain't even doing nothing. I'm not even doing nothing.
Then, Mr. Wilson also asked them if their body cameras were turned on, which implied that he already knew these cops were up to no good.
I'm not, y'all got your camera room? Yep.
As Mr. Wilson continued to question the officers as to what was going on, he was told to place his hands behind his back in order to place him in handcuffs.
Please don't. Come on, put your hands behind.
It becomes pretty clear that both of these officers were unlawfully detaining Mr. Wilson. As this went on, one of the officers, namely Trooper Paul Arrowwood, violently slammed Mr. Wilson to the ground and ordered him to roll over with his hands behind his back while physically trying to secure Mr. Wilson's arms. In response, Mr. Wilson could be clearly heard, telling the officers that he could place his hands behind his back by himself.
I can get my hands behind my back, bro. I can get my hands behind my back.
However, despite Mr. Wilson's verbal agreement to comply with the officers, Trooper Arrowwood decided to punch Mr. Wilson in the face multiple times while ordering him to roll over. The body camera footage proves that Mr. Wilson was not resisting, but rather trying to roll over by himself without the officer's unnecessary physical force. Trooper Arrowwood was physically assaulting Mr. Wilson with no justifiable reason whatsoever. Mr. Wilson shouted for help out of fear, but was then punched in the face by Trooper Arrowwood several more times. While Trooper Arrowwood continued to engage in a scuffle with Mr. Wilson, the second officer on the scene threatened to tase him. But that still did not stop Trooper Arrowwood from punching Mr. Wilson in the face over and over again. even though he showed zero signs of resistance.
Roll over. Roll over. Roll over. Roll over. Or you're gonna get tased. Roll the over.
And to make matters far worse, Trooper Arrowwood then delivered several knee blows to Mr. Wilson's face. All of this happened right in front of the second officer, who simply stood there and watched.
Put your hand behind your goddamn motherfucking back. Let me tase him.
Soon after this,
Did you hear that? Do you want me to tase him? Put a 1 in the chat if nothing happens to either one of these cops. Absolutely nothing. They get a pat, a slap on the wrist.
multiple other officers showed up on the scene to provide backup, and at one point, a total of 6 officers are seen physically restraining Mr. Wilson. This begged the crucial question of whether 6 grown men were really needed to restrain one single man who had just been brutally injured, thanks to Trooper Arrowwood. The scuffle finally came to an end when the officers placed Mr. Wilson in handcuffs. However, the footage shows yet another alarming scene, as one of the officers then pulled Mr. Wilson up from the grass and threw him back down once again.
Look what they're doing to him.
Wow.
He said, "You beat my ass like that." They just beat him up.
3115, car 20, strong weapon, taking off.
But the unnecessary force and tyranny did not end there. Shortly after, Trooper Arrowwood can be seen pulling Mr. Wilson up from his collar and pushing him towards the patrol vehicle. To make matters worse again, Trooper Arrowwood then grabbed Mr. Wilson by his neck and continued to hold it that way while he searched Mr. Wilson for any weapons or illegal substances. Amidst this horrific situation, Mr. Wilson told Trooper Arrowwood that he'd be suing him, to which Trooper Arrowwood, with a grin on his face, replied, "Sue me then."
What good? I swear to God, I'm suing your bitch ass.
Eventually, after a thorough search while continuing to physically restrain Mr. Wilson, the officers found nothing illegal and proceeded to place him inside the patrol vehicle, even though he had done nothing wrong whatsoever. Mr. Wilson also stated that he was bleeding, which was no surprise after the countless blows to his face by Trooper Arrowwood. Consequently, Mr. Wilson requested an ambulance to check on his injuries and treat him accordingly. A few minutes later, EMS arrived on the scene and checked Mr. Wilson out, who informed the paramedic that he was beaten up for no reason, and his face was in severe pain as a result. But they rather chose to physically assault an innocent man who had done nothing unlawful. Mr. Wilson was treated on the scene and then transported to the police office, where he was initially charged with assault and resisting police. In the incident report, written by Trooper Arrowwood, the phrase active resistance is quoted a whopping 10 times, which is rather outrageous, considering that the body cam footage made it pretty clear that Mr. Wilson did not resist to such an extent that would justify the level of force used by Trooper Arrowwood. In addition to this, Trooper Arrowwood wrote that he took Mr. Wilson to the ground because Mr. Wilson was ignoring his verbal commands, and he wasn't sure if Mr. Wilson was armed or not. Lastly, the report also contained a blatant lie, as Trooper Arrowwood alleges that Mr.
So, did you hear that? They didn't know if he was armed or not. That is code word for officer safety, that anything can happen to you.
Wilson landed on his stomach after throwing him to the ground and then attempted to stand back up. However, the body camera footage does not even remotely suggest that. Meanwhile, prosecutors declined to charge Mr. Wilson with a crime, and he was released from the Saginaw County Jail on the afternoon of September 6, 2022, after spending 2 nights in custody. Then, 3 weeks later, the Michigan State Police suspended Trooper Arrowwood, and a professional standards complaint was sent to the department's first lieutenant, Michael Anderson, for a criminal investigation. Following this, on October 27, 2022, another lieutenant at the department requested Trooper Arrowwood to come in for an interview regarding the ongoing investigation, to which he declined and chose to speak to a union representative instead. Months later, on March 2, 2023, Trooper Arrowwood was ordered to appear in court. During his arraignment in Saginaw County District Court, Trooper Arrowwood was charged with 1 count of common law offense or misconduct in office, a felony that carries a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine, as well as 1 count of assault and battery, a misdemeanor that can result in up to 93 days in jail and a $500 fine. Trooper Arrowwood is currently free on a $7,500 personal recognizance bond and is to remain on unpaid suspension from the Michigan State Police until his case is resolved.
Officer facing 5 years prison time.
Almost 15 times for no.
So hold on a second. So you know, I don't need to run it back. We saw it. There was a half a dozen cops on top of him, hurting him. Why aren't they all charged? If that were you and I, because of the model penal code, then each and every one of us would be charged with felonies for doing that to that man, for holding him down while the other one was punching and kneeing and kicking. And remember, you're 6 men there. So one man couldn't have got off them and grabbed the guy doing the punching and kneeing and kicking and stopped that from happening? Absolutely he could have. Absolutely he could have.